Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here. Welcome to this episode of The Numbers. I'm here with Philippe J. Fournier as always. Philippe, how you doing this week?
Good morning, Eric. It's been a busy one, huh? We were at the Québec Solidaire convention in Super Gatineau last weekend.
What did you think of
Lots of
Gatineau, by the
polls.
way?
Oh, I you don't that's I. Well, thing is, I only saw the downtown, and
Hmm.
I saw it on a Friday night, and it was quiet.
Yeah.
Lots of concrete, not many trees. But I don't want the people who get to know to be mad at me. I know you guys have the most beautiful park just next door, which I've been to many times. I had just never been in a hotel in Gatineau. It's a
Yeah.
quiet place.
Downtown Ottawa, downtown Gatineau. At night, not a lot going on. You go down to Spark Street, you go down to the area close to Parliament. There's not much going on downtown
I,
Ottawa.
I did not want to sound like the arrogant Montrealer, but it was quiet, but it was also very cold. So I guess Les Gatinois wanted to stay home on that cold Friday night, but it's all good.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll warm up with some discussion of polls. Um, I feel like this week was, it's almost as if a lot of the pollsters are putting out maybe their last numbers of the year or something like that. We got kind of the trifecta of online polls over the last week from Leger, from Abacus, from Ipsos. And just as we were discussing this, a new poll from Research Code came out. Um, I don't like, to me, I think the thing to talk about is is the NDP going to pass the Liberals?
Yeah,
Because aside from that, I'm not seeing much new.
yeah.
But these numbers we saw from Nanos as well came out this week. Literally had them tied. I'm starting to think that it's possible that before the end of the year we might see a poll with the Liberals in third. What do you think?
The thing is, if let's say the Liberals lead the NDP by 2 points, just statistically, we will see one with the
Yeah.
NDP ahead. It's just what the nature of statistic is. Um, what I wonder more about is why. Like I know the Liberals are performing
Mm.
badly right now, and we see the numbers. The satisfaction number with Justin Trudeau is again below 30% in that new Léger poll. It's at 29. But it's not like the NDP covered itself in glory either. Is it by default? Is it just people that say, you know what, I had enough of those liberals, and then you go with Jack Mead Singh? I don't see why Jack Mead Singh suddenly is seeing his numbers increase. Sometimes it's not rational. Always trying to find reasons in in current events why that would happen. But perhaps it's just the Liberals are sinking, and at some point they're going to catch the NDP on the way down. I don't know. What do you think?
I think one of the things that's interesting about it, though, is that in Eastern Canada, because Abacus had this interesting breakdown where they looked at the rest of Canada versus Quebec, and in the rest of Canada, the two parties were tied.
Yeah.
Uh, we're not really seeing a rise for the NDP in Atlantic Canada. They're still usually in the mid-teens.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. We're seeing a point or two up in Ontario, which is big because up 2 points. That is more or less gives you an extra point at the national level.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing any increase in Quebec. I think it's primarily that the NDP is doing pretty okay in Western Canada, and the Liberals are doing so badly in Western Canada now that that is what is driving the NDP moving up, which isn't really good for seats. In BC, it would make a difference for seats,
Yeah.
but in Alberta, there's no chance really of the NDP winning a third seat. And in Saskatchewan, they might be able to win one in the north
Yeah.
because of the changes in the boundaries. But apart from that, the NDP, if they end up doing 10 points better in Alberta and the prairies, they might be lucky to get one or two seats out of it, right? But I think it's primarily the fact that the Liberal brand in Western Canada has become so weak
Yeah.
that a lot of those voters are going to the NDP, even if it won't deliver a lot of seats.
You look at the BC breakdown, and again, I know those are small sample size, but we have multiple polls. So Ipsos has the NDP at 25 in BC. Léger has them at 35. And I'm not sure what Abacus. I think it was the high 20s. Oh yeah, I have it.
29.
Yeah. So I mean, considering the Liberals are down, except Léger. Léger has them at 25, but still, the average is down. Yeah, you would see in the lower mainland and in Vancouver probably a few more NDP seats that are not necessarily leaning conservatives, even though the conservatives could win if they go in the middle, a split vote, right? But how many seats would that be for the NDP? Like total maybe 30? You could imagine a few seats downtown Toronto that would go to the NDP. In Atlantic Canada, maybe Halifax.
St. John's East.
St. John's East, but it was because of the candidate. I forget his name right
Jack
now.
Harris.
But
they have a decent candidate now, I think, is the head of the Federation of Labor in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that might be able to win them a seat, but yeah.
In Quebec, we discussed this on Les Chiffres, but maybe Laurier-Sainte-Marie, so maybe Guilbeault's seat, if they do well in Montreal. Is that enough to surpass the Liberals in seats? I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, because how many seats can the Liberals win in Quebec right now? They can win still at least 30, right?
They could win 30, yeah.
And so for the NDP to pass the Liberals in the seat count, they need to, like, the Liberals have to almost not win anything else in the rest of the country, because the NDP getting to 35-40 right now with these kinds of numbers with the Conservatives so high is really tough, right? So it's hard to see how the Liberals finish third in the seat count if they can hold on to what they have in Quebec.
However, though, to be fair, I mean, I thought 25 was the floor for the Liberals. It looks like it might not be. So in the coming weeks before Christmas and maybe just after Christmas, if we have the Liberals at 21, then all bets are off, right? And the question becomes, and I know you and I are numbers people, so we'll be careful not to stray off our path, but is the NDP suddenly more tempted to pull their support for the Liberals if they can see an opportunity to win more seats than the Liberals, even though it would mean a massive Poiliev majority?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Either way, if they think that they can't avoid a Conservative majority at some point, I guess the potential to replace the Liberals might be enough to have them bring down the government. But we still, especially, a lot of people outside of Quebec always forget that the Bloc is also there, and the Bloc has more seats than the NDP.
That's right.
And
that's right.
The Bloc, doesn't really need to have an election. Their prospects for gains are pretty light.
It's slim.
Their chances of losing seats are also pretty low. So there's not it's an election for the Bloc would be mostly just risk, right? And I'm not sure if like, we know that they have signaled to the Liberals that they're not interested in an election in the short term. I don't know. I feel like if it comes down to voting on something, bringing down a budget, that kind of thing, the Liberals don't need to do much to give the Bloc enough reason to keep them in office, right? You don't need to give Quebec that much for the Bloc to say that this is enough.
Eric, do you remember shortly after the NDP convention in Hamilton, we had this discussion with the Jagmeet Singh's vote of confidence? Wasn't it like 81 or something? I think it was 81%, right?
Yeah.
And we said it's just good enough without being great, that if the NDP doesn't make massive gains in the next election, Jagmeet Singh is out the door, right? Could the NDP be tempted to go into an election, betting rather, that they would do better than Liberals, but you find yourself in a Poiliev majority, and then Jagmeet Singh can say, "Hey, I took the party to second place." I don't know.
It's a weird scenario, right?
It's really weird.
If you let's say you end up in the NDP second place, or at least ahead of the Liberals, because again, the Bloc could end up if the Liberals are falling so much that they're giving up all of those seats in Quebec, that probably means the Bloc is getting close to 40, right? So
official opposition.
There's like 3D chess here with this, right? But like, let's say the NDP surpasses the Liberals, maybe in the vote, maybe in the seats, whatever. Then it's a win, right? So Jagmeet Singh stays around. Now, there'll always be the question of how long he wants to stay around. He'll be leader by the next election for 8 years, which is starting to get to be a long time. But
if he's leader of the opposition, he's staying. Even though
Yeah,
I've
I would
said
think
for
so.
I've
Yeah.
said for some time now that the NDP seem to have lost their killer instinct, because clearly it's not working with a Jack Beat Sig, and then suddenly you see the Liberals sinking like a rock. Um, so maybe I'll have to eat my words there, but I don't know. We're getting into a weird situation with the Conservatives around 200 seats, and then suddenly all the other parties have to fight for the crumbs.
Yeah.
And there's no, I mean, I think we've mentioned this earlier, but those new polls that we have seen this week, and again, there was many new polls, none of them indicate that the Conservatives are still on the rise. They are stabilizing around the 40% mark, which is good enough. You're going to win if you get 40% if you're Pierre Poilievre. Oh, absolutely. They'll take it. And so I think I wrote this last week on 338.ca if you want to check it out. That now the Poilievre can play the trap. He can play defense. He doesn't have to recruit new voters. He's got his coalition right now. That's enough to win. And you have an unpopular prime minister, an NDP leader who, to be frank, is not a threat, has never been a threat, right? Yeah, it's gonna be. We've said that for 2 straight podcasts. I'm gonna have to repeat it. It's going to be a long 22 months.
But we should point out, like, there was a lot of, and we discussed it on our last episode, that Poilievre and the Conservatives had not a great week last week, with the vote on Ukraine and having to kind of defend what their position was, and then the thing that Poilievre had with the CP reporter. These polls have not really been taken after that. I think one of the polls, maybe the Abacus poll, was done just in the few days after the weekend. But I'm wondering if there's 2 possibilities. One, that this won't matter, that it won't change anybody's votes. But the second possibility is that it'll take a bit more time to kind of filter out. Like, people aren't reacting daily. We're not like in the middle of a campaign, right?
That's right.
So we'll see. So it's possible that we could see the Conservative numbers come down if this does have an impact. But it's also possible that it won't have any impact at all. Everybody has kind of chosen their camps, and everything that they see and hear is just reinforcing what they already think, right? So that'll be the thing to watch. I'll be curious to see if, when Abacus next comes out, maybe, whether the positive, negative numbers for Poilievre are changing at all.
I bet they won't, but I see what you're saying. And he did look very aggressive with that reporter. I know the core base, I don't want to generalize, but you know what I mean. There's a core base that the mainstream media is against the Conservatives, and so whatever they can do to humiliate them or crush them or answer to them is good. I don't think that the average voter is like that, but again, he doesn't need to recruit new voters. And by the way, I want to say this: when my hockey analogy about playing the trap, I had so many people comment, "Oh, but that's not a good strategy. Playing the defense in the third period when you're leading, you get scored on and you lose that game. It's a risky strategy." I'm sorry, but that's a huge confirmation bias. That's a huge selection bias, because most teams that lead in the third period win.
Right.
The thing is, you remember the comebacks, especially if you're a Leafs fan. You remember the comebacks, but
I don't think Leafs fans remember lots of comebacks.
Well, it was 4-1, it was 3-1, but yeah, it's so. I would say again, if you're in the Conservative leadership, just play it cool, play the clock, and you're gonna win. I'm not sure Mr. Poilievre is able to do that, and I'm not sure Jenny Bird wants him to do that. So it could be very risky, but it has worked so far. So it's not like commentators like you and I and others I've seen in several media outlets saying that Mr. Poilievre has to be risky. So far, he's looking at the numbers. He's like, hey, I must be doing something right. I'm leading by a lot against a prime minister that seems to be directionless right now.
There's a difference, though, between playing it safe and not taking risks, right? I think that they can. It's not that they have to start being afraid, of doing or saying anything, but it's just that they don't need to push. They can just kind of keep what they're doing. They don't need to push and be aggressive. But at the same time, if they start being too kind of safe, then that ends up also causing some problems as well, right? So it's almost like, with the trap, you got to stick to the plan. You can't become overly defensive. So we'll see how they're going to approach things. Maybe I haven't been paying much attention this week, but I haven't seen much of Poilievre this week. So I wonder if they decided let's not fill the airwaves for a little while. Let's take the pressure off a little bit.
If you're the Liberals or the NDP for that matter, and you've seen kind of not a weakness from Poilievre, but a misstep from Poilievre last week, do you say to yourself, okay, we have something. It may not have worked because it was a one-time event, but there is something to exploit there. That perhaps talking about Ukraine, and the polls show that many conservative voters are sick of hearing about Ukraine. They don't feel the same, I don't want to say solidarity because that may not be the right word, but those polls showing should Canada continue to support Ukraine. Most Canadians say yes. When you break it down by party, conservatives are on their own side there. They're mostly getting tired of Ukraine. Some of those are, the fringe Trumpists, the fringe, populists. But there are also many isolationists that say Canada should not get involved, period. And so perhaps this is a crack in the armor that the Liberals and the NDP could attack Poilievre on. But it seems like such a small issue. You don't win an election by saying we will support Ukraine more than you do. That's not, I'm not sure that's a long-term strategy though.
I think it's more the character issue, the kind of interaction that with that reporter, whether you agree with it or not, it's just kind of the way it comes off, and that character kind of issue. But also with Ukraine, you don't make it about Ukraine. You make it about ideology being put ahead of pragmatism, right? That they weren't supporting a Ukraine free trade deal because it had some kind of mention of carbon pricing, like. I think that would be the strategy there, but if you're the other parties, you need a lot of help. You need Poilievre to keep doing things like he had with that interaction with that reporter. Once or twice, like you said, it might for supporters of him might think that that's nice, that he's standing up for himself, that kind of thing. But if it's a repeated thing, we have one of these every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Yeah. Then it starts to get the impression that Poilievre's what was it that the UK Tories said, that they realized they had become the nasty party, and people didn't like that. That would be the danger, I think, for Poilievre, because they spent all this money on an ad campaign trying to make him look nice, right? Yeah. Family man, his wife loves him, he spends time with his kid. When you have things that happen like that, it undermines the message that you're trying to put out, right? If the Conservatives had ads putting out that he was a pit bull who'll stand up for you and will say the truth and will not, back down, then he would be reinforcing that ad. But the ads they put out were clearly trying to say that he's not those things, or he's not only those things, right? So the ads were their strategy. That was counter to their strategy. So clearly that wasn't what they want to happen. So we'll see if they're going to react to it. And also whether we'll see any difference in the polls in the coming weeks. And if not, then I think they'll learn the lesson that if that they don't need to change course, but maybe just make sure they don't open up these opportunities again in the future.
It's a long time to be leading in the polls. 2 years, it's a long time. It's just sometimes the alternative is, you can play badly, but if your opponent is down and out, you can come out ahead still. Yeah. There was an Ipsos poll.
Well, look at Wabkanu, just Wabkanu in Manitoba.
Yeah.
They were leading for most of the time, right? Yep. Over years and years and years. The election got close, and I think that could happen again here, federally. But sometimes when you're trailing that far behind in the polls for years, you lose. Yeah. It's just as simple as that, right?
Yeah, if your opponent plays the trap, leading 3-1, most of the time you will lose that game. But we will remember the comebacks again. There was an Ipsos poll, Eric, that tested whether Monsieur Trudeau should resign.
Yeah.
And also, I found it interesting, they also had the numbers on potential Liberal leaders. And I saw those numbers. I have the charts right here in front of me to make sure I get the right numbers. But these are not. None of these numbers are good news for the Liberals, are they?
No.
Ooh.
No.
Anita Anand, Marc Carney, François-Philippe Champagne, Mélanie Joly, and Chrystia Freeland. Chrystia Freeland had 25% positive impressions. That's the highest of the 5 named they tested. But most voters have no idea who these people are. And if you don't know who Mélanie Joly are, perhaps you're not following politics much, or perhaps you and I are following it too much.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah, but Mélanie Joly is in Montreal. I live in Montreal. She's a former mayor candidate, so maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But Anita Anand, I remember her as a vaccine lady. Now she's at the Treasury, right? Treasury.
Yeah.
But
I think
that's
vaccine
not...
lady was her ministerial title. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, she was procurement. That's what.
Procurement. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. But now she's at Treasury, which I don't think is a high-profile post, even though it's an important
one.
post.
But yeah.
Yeah. But these numbers are, I don't know. They don't. I understand why many Liberals might be tempted to think that Justin Trudeau should step down because he has bad numbers. There's no obvious replacement for Trudeau here.
No, and we've been saying that forever, and it keeps being the case. Even though, and you could also take it from the perspective that we've been talking now for at least 4 months about Trudeau resigning and potential replacements, and these numbers continue to be bad. It's not that, it's not like because we're talking a lot about Mark Carney that a lot of people have an opinion on him. They don't. A lot of people don't have an opinion on him. And Ipsos also asked, how likely would you be to vote for the party if the next election? I don't like a question like that because I don't know what that means. Yeah. If you already are likely to vote for them, does it change anything? If you're never, anyway. But when you compare the names that were tested, you got the highest was 25% Chrystia Freeland. And the lowest was 16% François-Philippe Champagne. There's not a lot of difference there. I don't think people were really responding all that much to the names. There's just no figure that is... when Justin Trudeau became leader in 2013, the next poll had them at 40%.
Yeah.
They were leading. And they led for... People always say that the Liberals came from third place. They were in first place for 2 years. And then they dropped in the spring of 2015. So people just reverted to the Liberals being in first place. Anyway,
but they dropped because we remember the numbers. And Rachel Notley wins the NDP with the NDP in Alberta, and then Thomas Mulcair became first place.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, because Tom Mulcair was the Alberta NDP leader, and it all makes sense. But what I'm saying is that Trudeau resigns. If Trudeau resigns, I bet you the numbers go up 3 points. They get up to 28%. But then one of these people becomes the new leader and nothing happens. Party stays at the exact same level. They don't get this boost. And then that leader has to spend the next 6 months to a year to 18 months getting themselves back into the game and known, right? So there isn't a bolt-on easy solution here for the Liberals. I think that's the issue.
And you know what? It's not just us. For those who don't know, I'm not a journalist, but there is some journalism in what I do in that I meet people from every party and I discuss off the record. And so I'm not going to reveal details of discussions that I had last week, but I had a drink with somebody, in the Liberal Party, and he was kind of astonished that Poilievre had not self-destructed yet. And I was astonished that he was astonished, because I was like, have you followed world news in the past decade? Poilievre is following a playbook that has been successful in many countries, and the timing is right. I don't think Poilievre in 2020 would have, if let's say he entered the race and won against Erin O'Toole, would have necessarily fared better. But right now there is high unsatisfaction with the government, and so he's banking on that, and as he should. But he basically said, okay, if Trudeau leaves, what do we do? And I said, well, you have two choices. You have to find somebody that can win at least half of Ontario and 30 seats in Quebec. Otherwise, assuredly, you lose. Or, and it's sad to say and it sounds mean, but you find your own Kim Campbell to absorb the next loss, and then you rebuild for the next few years. You and I have heard many stories. In 1993, Kim Campbell was against Jean Charest, and many PCs were like, "We have to keep Jean Charest for the future. We're going to lose this election. We cannot have Jean Charest lose so badly, so that he's burned. Basically, he's finished." And that's what happened. Kim Campbell lost badly. I don't think they expected that badly. And then Jean Charest became leader, and he kind of rebuilt slowly. I think he went from 2 to 20 seats. It was respectable, but. So
Well, yeah, but would you could also make the argument though that if people are upset with Trudeau, then having him be defeated would be better for the party because then they can kind of build up from after that, right? Rather than have someone else come along and take those hits. Now, maybe Trudeau wouldn't want to do that, but I don't know. I feel like if you want to make the case that the Liberal Party can rebuild afterwards, maybe you need to have that catharsis of people defeating Justin Trudeau for them to be able to move on. I don't know. Again, though, 2 years, lots can still happen. We can't assume, we don't know what's going to come out of the U.S. presidential election, what impact that'll have, things on the economy. Who knows? By fall 2025, we might be in the midst of another NAFTA renegotiation. Like, who knows what's happening, right? So yeah.
We have to have a bingo card for 2025.
I don't want to. That sounds bad.
Like a lower interest rate, lower inflation, better economy.
Like there's so much that could still happen,
There's,
right?
I don't know. It's a short time, but it's also lots of time, to have those things happen. Like
the Liberals aren't like it's not like inevitable that they'll lose, right? Which I think is a lot of how the discussion is. But it's like, they need to do a lot to get into a position where they can be competitive again. They need a lot to have to fall their way. Doesn't mean that they can't do it, and doesn't mean that those things won't happen. But all else being equal, and this is going to sound like the dumbest, most obvious thing to say, you'd want to be Pierre Poilievre right now. Very much.
But I agree. You said it's not inevitable. That's true, but precedent says that the Liberals are done. Right? If you look at precedent, they're done.
Precedent,
So
but there's always exceptions.
Unprecedented things can happen. So
that's why people should stick with this podcast because we're going to cover the ups and downs. And
Hey, do you want to? Should we go to provinces? I think we have a few things interesting to say.
Yeah.
Right? Did we have more things on the federal?
No, I think that's good. Let's go to. There's two things we want to chat about for the provincial scene. One being in Quebec. So on the weekend, we went to the Quebec Solidaire convention in Gatineau, as we mentioned. So if you don't know, Quebec Solidaire is a left-wing party in Quebec. It's probably the most left-wing party that has representation in a legislature anywhere in Canada. It's a sovereignist party. It uses the color orange, and they have a system where they have two co-spokespeople. They're not leaders. Because the model that Quebec Solidaire has is very grassroots, so the members decide and vote on policy and platform. It's not that the leader chooses which policies and to put together in the platform. And so the spokespeople are, in a way, literally spokespeople for the movement and they have a male one and a female one. The male one is Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. He's been there since 2017. The female one was Manon Massé, who stepped aside, and then there was a leadership contest. So there's 3 women running. Do you want to say what happened?
Well, it was really close, and we had an indication how close it was. The vote was not from members, and there was no vote by mail or vote or electronic vote. You had to be a delegate and on the spot, and there were about 600 delegates, and so it's a preferential ballot. And it went to the second round. There were 3 candidates, of course. It went to the second round, and the winner basically won by 3 votes.
Yeah.
Émilie Lessard-Terrien, former MNA in Rouyn-Noranda-Témiscamingue. She lost re-election against the CAQ in 2022. She's holding on, and she was campaigning against 2 MNAs. One was from Sherbrooke and one from downtown Montreal. And again, she won by 3 votes, a very close race. And now they have an extra parliamentary co-spokesperson. Émilie Lessard-Terrien, her name is. So I think it's an interesting choice. She was the best candidate at the debate. I was at the debate on the convention floor, and again, the debate was watched. It was not on TV because it was 4 delegates that were there. And she by far was the best in the debate, and I guess when you win by 3 votes, that makes the difference. She would have lost otherwise. I'm not sure what that does for the future, but
yeah, I think that's the question. Yeah. What does Le Sartérien winning mean versus had it been Gazal or Labrie? Is there a different direction because of her?
I really don't know. It's a good question. It's just that Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, the male co-spokesperson, sorry, it's hard to say that, is taking so much space in the media. He's such a well-known person in Quebec from his days in leading the student protest in 2012 and then joining Québec Solidaire and then winning and then becoming a spokesperson. We'll see how they work together. But for now, this is still Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois' party. The question will be, will the delegates select Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois to be the candidate for premier for the next election? And will Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois be at the debate in 2026? We don't know that. I think it's the easy assumption to say that he will. I think it's a risky assumption. We do not know that. Delegates of Québec Solidaire, they are not the average Québec Solidaire voters. Eric, you said it's a left-wing party. The delegates are really left-wing. They are a motivated bunch. And so sometimes they can take decisions that can be seen as risky or sometimes foolish. And we'll see how it goes, but it was an interesting place to be. It may get no far more interesting, I can tell you that.
Oh man, come on! So because
I'm kidding.
We have lots and lots of pull. We actually got to sit down with Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. We spent most of the time speaking in French and asking him questions. And if you wanted, you could listen to that interview on Les Chiffres podcast. But we also had a few questions for him in English, and let's play that right now.
Yes.
Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
A couple of questions for you. One being, there are a lot of Anglophones and allophones, people who might speak English as their second language, who are progressives, but they might not be sovereignists.
Yeah.
How do you convince them that Quebec Solidaire is an option?
Well, I think you have to build trust. And you have to build trust by showing concretely with those citizens, those electors, that, we are an independentist party, but the project that we have is in a lot of very key aspects for them a very different project than the traditional project that has been promoted by, of course, the Parti Québécois. If we show that those people can trust us, that we will never make compromises on the defense of rights and freedoms, on the defense of on the fight against racism, discrimination. If we show that if we earn their trust on those very sensible issues for that electorate, I think a dialogue is possible on the idea of a project of independence. It's a challenge. We will not do this in a few weeks or a few months, but I think such a dialogue is possible, and I think that's the reason why even today, in a riding like the Saint-Henri-Saint-Anne, for example, not a majority, but a significant part of that electorate chose to vote for Québec Solidaire. If it would be impossible, it would have been difficult for us to win such a neighborhood.
There are a lot of voters who support Quebec Solidaire at the provincial level, and they support the New Democrats at the federal level. Yeah. It's about a third of the electorate, I think, of your electorate. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap between New Democrats and Quebec Solidaire. What do you think about that?
Our electorate is on that issue similar to our membership. A lot of members of Québec Solidaire are actually engaged inside the Bloc Québécois. Others are engaged inside the NDP, and a lot of our members and our activists are just deeply uncomfortable with federal politics because they're for independence, but also because those two parties have big flaws for a solidaire mind. The Bloc Québécois has done gestures that have really hurt activists in Quebec that fight against systemic racism, for example. The NDP still has in its DNA a centralization reflex that is still very uncomfortable for a lot of Solidaire. The issue of dental care is an example. We've been fighting for a dental care plan in Quebec for years at Quebec Solidaire. It's one of our more popular promises. But when you see the NDP fighting to have a federal program on those issues, we're put in a very difficult position because we have to say to the NDP, you know, we are for a better dental care for Quebecers, but this is not the job of the federal government. So those two parties have similarities, but also big flaws for us. That's the reason why when federal elections come by, a lot of activists of Quebec Solidaire, maybe they go and vote, but they're not engaged in the political process.
And we'll close on this. What do you think of Jagmeet Singh then, as leader of the NDP?
I think Jagmeet represents something that a lot of people love into politics. He's a guy he has a very particular background. He has a trajectory in his life that is different. And a lot of people said that with his profile, he was going to be like unanimously rejected in Quebec. And it's not exactly the case, you know. So I think his trajectory is one demonstration that you can have people with different background and different profile into politics, and that Quebecers are able to, even if they may not vote for him, they're able to appreciate him. And that's a big lesson for people that think that Quebecers are hostile to politicians that have the background of a guy like Jagmeet.
Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, thank you very much for joining us on the numbers. We appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Have a great convention, and thank you again.
What did you think of what he had to say? We're now about a week later, but I wonder if you remember, asked him about, voting for a progressive party when you're an independence party, and I was surprised. I thought it was interesting what he said about Jagmeet Singh.
Well, you put him on a spot there because you don't want. I mean, if you're Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, all sovereigntists in Quebec. I'm not generalizing, but I think I'm on safe ground to say that many sovereigntists in Quebec are wary of the federal NDP because of its tendencies in the past to be a very centralizing force in federal politics. Now, whether that's fair or not, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of animosity, especially since the 2011 election. Some Bloc Québécois people still haven't forgiven Jack Layton for what happened. And so I know it's a long time ago, but there's animosity there. You put him on a spot because you cannot diss another fellow progressive politician. But at the same time, there's not much, aside from, again, progressive policies, that's not much. The Venn diagram of the NDP and the Quebec Solidaire, they're pretty separated. So it was an interesting. I think he was really prudent, his answer. But what did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. As you said, I'm not sure he gets asked that very much because I don't think that the kind of Quebec media that would talk to him a lot would think that much about the New Democrats and worry too much about it. But like my mind thinks about the overlap and the fact that, as we mentioned in the polls, there's lots of New Democrats who vote Quebec Solidaire. There's lots of Solidaire voters who vote for the NDP. So there is overlap there, but it's like the two parties they almost have to pretend neither of them exist, right?
Yeah.
Because they're each of them toxic for the other, right? Because Quebec Solidaire is a sovereignist party. Doesn't make sense to be aligned with NDP. The NDP is a centralizing party that is not seen as being aligned with a lot of views in Quebec in terms of identity and stuff like that. And so the Quebec Solidaire can't be too close to NDP, but the two are similar. And like I said, Quebec Solidaire chose the color orange. They didn't need to. So they have to wear that, I think. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. We'll see what happens with Le Sartre-Terrien and how much space she has. Who ends up being the choice for who they put forward as the premier designated candidate, because you can't have two people be premier. But anyway, it was an interesting weekend, I think.
I'll say this though: in 2012, the Québec Solidaire had one MNA. It was Amir Kadir, who had won in a previous election. And if memory serves, they chose Françoise David, unelected MNA, unelected, to go to the leaders' debate, thinking it would raise her profile, it would help her win, and she did win. So could it be that, Québec Solidaire, perhaps they'll know they won't win the election. They also know that Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois will win his riding of Gouin in Rosemont in Montreal. So perhaps to help Émilie Lessard-Terrien have a higher profile, they could choose her to be on the debate floor. Again, it's a tough thing to predict what Québec Solidaire delegates will do, for better or for worse. So.
One little word on the Ontario Liberals and
That's
what's
right.
happening in Ontario politics. So we're recording this on Thursday. We are doing a live stream of the Kitchener Centre by-election results on Thursday night. So by the time you're listening to this, most of you will have already known what happened in the by-election, so we won't talk about that. We'll talk about it next week. And on the weekend, we have the Ontario Liberal leadership. We'll find out who becomes the new leader on December 2nd. And again, we'll talk about that in next week's episode. This is a patrons-only episode, so if you want some Ontario politics coverage, you'd have to sign up for our Patreon at thenumberspod.ca. I don't know. Do you have it? We did get a question about the Ontario Liberal leadership, so we'll get to that in our mailbag. But I don't know. What I'm between whether I think Crombie wins on the first ballot or not. I know some people talk about this being closer and all this stuff, but I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm not sure if it's going to be that close.
I'm just curious. What did you make of the news that the turnout was actually not that great? Right? Wasn't it like
surprised.
30,000?
Did they put out the numbers? I didn't see any.
I think I saw 30,000 members voted, and I think it was a possibility around 80,000. Now, I'm not sure of those exact numbers, but I'm not shocked
the turnout was low, because you did have to get up and go, right? You couldn't mail in your ballot, and that can be a bigger ask. People aren't as used to doing that. So, but again, I'm not sure who that benefits.
I have no
turnout's
idea.
low. Maybe if people think Crombie's got it in the bag, that's not good for her, and the other side's more energized. But it could be the opposite. If they think she has it in the bag, the other side's not energized enough. So.
All right, let me ask you this then, because you know Ontario politics more than I do. I follow it, but you're just on the other side of the river there. Who do you think the PCs want the Liberals to choose, and who do you think the Ontario NDP wants the OLP to choose?
Well, if I was being mean, I'd say that the PCs would want it to be like Ted Hsu, just because Ted Hsu is not as well known, and he doesn't seem like a retail politician. Every time I've seen him or hear him speak, he sounds like the nicest guy. Like I want to be his friend. Like he sounds so pleasant and everything like that, which is terrific. That's what we should want in our politicians, but that's not generally how things go in elections. So, but if I'm thinking but let's just be more strategic. I would think that they would want it to be Nate Erskine-Smith, the PCs, because then they can paint him as being too far to the left. He's taken positions in the past that have been a bit more radical than the Liberals have generally been. So I think that would be easier for the PCs in order to paint him as like a downtown Toronto. I think that would probably be their best approach. And for the New Democrats, again, if they're just talking about strategically, I think it would be Crombie, because they can say that she's Doug Ford light, has skeletons in the closet when it comes to developer fundraising and all that kind of stuff. But I think both of them should probably be more afraid of Crombie. I know a lot of people have some issues with, some of that stuff, like with the fundraising, but she's from the GTA. She's a good retail politician. I think she lines up really well with Doug Ford on a debate stage. I see her as being a bigger threat to the PCs, and if she becomes the person who can defeat the PCs, that makes her a big threat to the NDP.
Here's the thing for those Ontario NDPs, rightly or wrongly, whether you like Miss Crombie or not, or her policies or potential policies, you just said that she will be painted as Doug Ford light. Well, I'm sorry, for Ontario voters, but many Ontario voters would vote for Doug Ford Light. Look at the numbers, right? So it's like, yeah, you may paint her like something like you don't want, but Ontario voters gave Doug Ford 2 majorities, and a Doug Ford Light could be the best remedy to a Doug Ford and come 2026. Again, rightly or wrongly, I'm just looking at the numbers. So I think you're right. I think it's Crombie that's the most dangerous for both. There was discussion in 2022, you remember this, Eric, of the progressive primary, right? Who's going to stand out between the OLP and the NDP as the best option to beat the PCs, while at the same time the PCs were doing their best to keep both parties tied, and they both ended up just below 24%. But to if we can just skip right now to the mailbag, one of the questions, and I'd like to mention it right now. So NLC's Milk, whatever that name is, welcome to the Discord. Ask over under for the Ontario Liberal leadership. I'm guessing he says the first round. If I put the line, I'm going to put you on a spot here, my friend. I put the line at Crombie's support in the first round at 50%. Over under.
Yeah. See, I think I'll take the under. I wrote something on the Rit.ca while we're plugging
It's
our
a
stuff.
really good site. Go see it.
Yeah. Looking at past leadership races, and generally, if you get over 40% on the first ballot, you usually win. If you get over 44%, there hasn't really a lot of cases. There are no recent cases of getting over 44% on the first ballot and losing. So I'm thinking it'll be more like that. I think she's going to win. Again, maybe play this back and we'll look really stupid next week. But I think she's going to win. But I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up at like 47 on the first ballot. But so I would take the under on 50.
You know what? I agree, but just for kicks and so that I can be right and put it in your face, I'll say perhaps we're missing something and she's going to have 59% on her first ballot. And perhaps we're trying to build a story and the inevitable thing is that she's going to win. So I'm going to say over, slightly over, but that's still over. So.
Okay, how about this? I'll give you an over-under.
Okay.
Over-under, Knack v. Erskine Smith.
On the first ballot?
Who is over, who is under?
I would say Knack v. Smith would be second place, I think. But...
Well, who's second?
Nate.
Okay. You said Knack v. Smith, so
Sorry. That's a
trying
good
to have
way.
both ways. Yeah.
I think the MP from. I think he's going to be second place. But again, we haven't seen many numbers. I'm surprised, by the way, because there were polls when Del Duca won.
Usually get some like internal polls or something that are leaked, right?
I don't think we've seen many of those, and so
at least
we're flying blind here. But impressions, I think. What do you think? Second place or third place for Nate?
I feel like Erskine Smith has been portrayed as the second candidate, so I feel like that probably benefits the most. But when you're talking about the way that the system works, it's Toronto. Each riding is equally weighted. So Erskine Smith has some competition in Toronto, I guess, with Crombie, I suppose. Nackby is from the Ottawa area, so he probably has the Ottawa ridings pretty tied up. But then Shu is from Kingston, so so I don't know. I'm thinking it would be Erskine Smith. He's raised more money than Nackby, but Shu has actually raised a decent amount of money. I wonder if he ends up just surprising everybody.
I did say
he'll be everybody's second choice, though. I bet.
Sorry, I'd say Nagby Smith just to try to sneak under.
Yeah.
We're actually the same person. Have you seen them together? Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be right either way. Okay, let's stick with Ontario politics. We got two questions on the Patreon. So as mentioned, we take questions from members of our Patreon in the Discord, which you can join at thenumberspod.ca. So we got one from Bob, who said, and he's referring to the projections I had on my site, but on yours as well. The PCs would more or less win the same amount of seats that they had in the last election. He said, despite many scandals, including recently the Greenbelt scandal, any sense of why the PCs have been able to maintain their support? how has the leader of the NDP changed things, Marit Stiles, if at all, and whether the Liberals will be able to shake anything up. And then NJ kind of followed up on it, and he said, do you think Ford's strategy when he comes out and apologizes for his missteps, scandals, has helped him, or is it just that it makes people a long time to get fed up? And he used that the Liberals have, federally, it seems like finally the being fed up has caught up to them. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on the general status of Ontario politics and why it is as it is?
You know what? I think there's a lot of parallels between Ford's PC and Legault's CAQ. And in last 5 years, we have seen François Legault, adjust and saying he's humbled and that he listens to the population. And it really sounds like Doug Ford, basically. They're having the same PR strategy when they have fumbles. The thing is, with Legault, lately, it's not working anymore. Yeah. At some point, time runs out on you. I'm not sure time has run out on Ford yet. The numbers that we had, of course, it's been a while since we saw an Ontario poll. I'm guessing before Christmas we'll see some more. But the PC brand is so strong that if you have a Liberal and NDP almost tied, the PC is always going to come back on top. And so, the PC brand is stronger than the Ford brand, I think. To answer Bob's question, why with the Greenbelt scandal? Because I don't think many people think it's a scandal. Those who think it's a scandal already don't vote for Ford. I don't want to go back again to the turnout in Ontario, and I won't. But many people don't pay attention to this stuff. They pay attention to this stuff when it affects them personally, and I don't think the Greenbelt scandal was one of those cases. So, with all things being equal, the PCs will always get at least their lower 30 level of support. And as for Marit Stiles, I think she's been, boring and inefficient, and the NDP still is stable. So I guess she's not that bad. It's really the Liberals who I wonder. If they crumble, then we have a race, and if they do well, then we have a race. But if they stay stable, it's just going to be same old, same old. I don't see the numbers moving in a short term.
A few things. So for me, the Legault comparison I think is good because François Legault has had a rough few months, and he admits some mistakes. But then instead of saying that I've learned, I'm not. He more or less has done over the last few months. You didn't like that. What about this?
Yeah,
That's true. You didn't like that I went back on this. So what if I went back on it again? What if we bring the Kings to Quebec City? What if we do? Whereas Ford has just more or less been, you're right, we screwed up. We're going to just reverse that. And then they don't come out with something different. They don't try to. They revert to, I think, Ontarians' position, which is status quo as much as possible. So I think that is why it might have worked for Ford. And again, I think it comes down to how people perceive him as a well-meaning oaf, like not to be mean to him, but I don't think they see him as like an evil person who is mean and bad and wants to do bad things. They see him as someone who
is bumbling,
is not smart enough to realize he shouldn't do these things. I'm not saying that's what he is, but I'm saying that's how I think a lot of Ontarians see him as like your uncle who is really affable and kind of says weird things sometimes, but he means well, so everybody forgives him. And I think that is just a strength that he has. It's the weirdest strength to have, but it's a good one in an election. For the other ones, Marit Stiles, I really don't. The issue is, in Ontario, opposition leader is probably about the least known person in Ontario. Honestly. Andrew Horwath, after being there for so long, still had about a third of the electorate who didn't know who she was. So Marit Stiles, I think, is just a non-entity, and I don't mean that personally. I think that for Ontarians, she's a non-entity, and she will be until the next election. It's just the way it is. And for the Liberals, I think what's significant about the potential for Bonnie Crombie is that she is known, especially for people in the GTA. So I think that changes things a lot. Whereas, when Stephen Del Duca became leader, no one knew who Stephen Del Duca was, right?
Yeah. They still don't know.
And they still don't know. No, even the people in Vaughan, they can't name the mayor. So I think that's it. But I think the Liberals do have the opportunity to shake things up a lot. But in between election polling in Ontario is really tough. It's really hard to know what's real and what's not. In a way, you almost have to be like, let's wait and see what happens in 2026. There's not. All right, let's.
If I may, just for a second here.
Yeah.
I was way too old when I was finally told by someone, it's Vaughan, not Vaughan. As a francophone looking at maps and writings, I always said Vaughan. And at some point somebody told me, it's Vaughan. I'm ashamed to say how old I was when I discovered this. So anyway, another question from the Discord. Izzy is asking, what do you feel is the likelihood of Conservatives in the next election, federal Conservatives, getting a higher popular vote than Mulroney got in the 88 election, and that is 43%. Mulroney went from 50% in 84 to 43% in 88. It's been
I'm sorry,
is that a cat? Is that a cat
yes.
that I'm hearing?
She is playing with this ball.
Oh, there you go. Throw it. It's cute.
Yeah, but you know what? She never plays with that ball. She's only doing it because I'm doing this.
I
Anyway.
see, yeah, she wants attention. But what do you think? Poiliev above 43%.
Has there been a poll that had them at 43?
The highest I think was 42.
42.
The highest, yeah.
And I mean, I think the Conservatives will beat their polls as they usually do, but that means they probably need to be at 41, 42. I have a lot of trouble seeing anybody getting 41, 42% of the vote. I just feel like we're too polarized and regionalized, and I'm not again, you can play this back to me in 2 years, but I really think it's really hard now with the Bloc being there, with the Greens taking a portion of the vote, PPC taking a portion of the vote. I think it's really hard for anybody to get over 40% in an election. So I'm going to say I think the likelihood is 10%.
I would tend to say the same also, but all these polls, especially look at the Léger poll, the Conservatives are leading right now among young voters, and that's not good for to beat your polls. That's not a good recipe to beat your polls. So,
that's true.
But again, is 41, 42 possible? Yeah, it is possible according to the numbers we've seen. So,
we got a question on the Discord from GK03, which is about the NDP floor opposition, whether the Liberals, and we kind of answered that. So I'm going to say that we preemptively answered that question, GK03. And so we get a lot of questions every week, and I think, as I mentioned on the Discord, we might save them for a future episode, mailbag episode in January, because we might not have that much to talk about. So I feel like we're already pretty late in the podcast. It might be time, as you blow your nose.
Oh yeah.
To go to the quiz.
Let's do this. So for those who listened to the previous episode, it was a members only episode. I finally got Eric to lose a quiz, but barely. And the quiz was easy. Basically, I take Canadian elections.
That was 2 episodes ago. We didn't do one on the last one.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so so it was a public episode. So basically, I gave Eric 3 choices of parties during a general election, and the question is simple: give me who had the most seats. I do not tell Eric right away if he's right or if he's wrong. I take the numbers, and at the end, I tell him his score. There are 7 rounds. To win, he has to get 6. 5 is considered a tie, and before 5, it's considered a loss. And I will give Eric a chance to change his answers once I give him the score. We'll go through this. It's the same
I don't know if I'm
format.
going to do that again. Last time I made more mistakes.
You did change a right answer to a wrong answer. Yeah. So okay. So I have themes for a few. There's 7 rounds. It's going to go fast. So okay. Are you ready, my friend?
I am ready.
Round number 1. René Lévesque's Parti québécois in 81. Jacques Parizeau's Parti québécois in 94. Or Lucien Bouchard's Parti québécois in 98. Who had
who won the most seats?
That's right.
I think that the Parti québécois won 81 seats in 81. No, that can't be right. It's because that's the year. But they did do well. He got 50% of the vote, and it was the best they ever did.
Just below 50%.
Yeah, but the National Assembly might have been a bit smaller. 94 they did well, and then in 98 it was more or less the same result. I think that the 1981 election was the best ever for the Parti québécois, so I'm going to say it was the 1981 election.
Okay, so René Lévesque punching that in. Okay, round number 2. Bob Ray's Ontario NDP in 1990. You may have heard it.
Oh, yeah.
Ed Stelmach's Alberta PC in 2008. Or Jean Charest's Quebec Liberals in 2003. Who won the most seats?
What's the theme there? Change of government?
This
No,
one there's
Stelmach didn't win one.
well this one there's no theme. Close
Okay,
results.
let's
that's
try
the
to
theme.
trip up Eric's theme. Yeah. Okay, the Bob Ray's NDP won 70-something seats. Charest won as well, I think, 70-something seats.
Oh,
and
well, you look at that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in Alberta, the amount of seats is currently 87, and I think it was probably similar then. The Liberals were under Kevin Taft, and apparently nobody wanted either of them to become premier, and turnout was like 40% something. But in terms of who won the most seats, I'm going to say it was... I'm going to say it was Ed Stelmach, because I think that the Liberals didn't do well enough to... Because I think in Ontario and in Quebec, I think the other parties won enough seats to bring the numbers down. Anyway,
Okay,
Ed Stelmach,
Stelmach.
2008, Alberta.
I punched that in. Okay. Round number 3. Now there's a theme. I'll let you decide. I'll let you guess what the theme is. You ready? Gary Dewar's Manitoba NDP in 99. Gary Dewar's Manitoba NDP in 03. Or Gary Dewar's Manitoba NDP in 07. You may have caught the theme.
I think the theme is Gary Dewar.
Who won the
Now,
most
did they
seats?
go up or down? That's interesting. I don't know. I
Or maybe
honestly
they went
don't
up
know.
and then down. We don't know. So
Yeah, I'm gonna say that. Let's see, 1999. I don't think that would have been the biggest one. They defeated the PCs. They got reelected in 2003. They got reelected in 2007. I think they were increasing. So I'm gonna say it was 2007.
2007. I punched that in. Okay. Round number 4. Is there a theme here? Maybe. Jacques Parizeau's Parti Québécois in 89. Lynn Metloyd's Ontario Liberals in 95. Or Linda Haverstock, Saskatchewan Liberals in 95. So the theme is parties that lost, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so all of those, they formed the official opposition, I think.
There's a theme.
Yeah. These would all be in the 20s, I believe. Somewhere in the 20s, maybe the 30s. I don't think it would be the Liberals in Saskatchewan. I think the NDP won a large enough win in 95. Because that's when the PCs completely started to collapse. Geez, Parizeau, Bourassa won a big victory in 89.
Yes, he did.
And McLeod in 90. You said it was 95, eh?
95, so it was Mike Harris winning.
He won a big win in 95. I'm going to say it was Jacques Parizeau, 1989.
All right, I punched that in. Round number 5. This one as a team, but we'll only know it when I tell you the answer. So. Howard Henton's Ontario NDP in 1999.
Okay.
Brian Mason's Alberta NDP. Oh, sorry. No. That wrong line. Sorry. Howard Hampton's Ontario NDP stays. Camille Thériault, New Brunswick Liberals in 99. Or Francis McKenzie, Nova Scotia. I guess it's Liberal. I didn't punch it in 06. Yeah, it's the Liberals in 06.
Yeah. Okay. Howard Hampton and the NDP would usually win around 12 seats or something like that. And at Thériault, that was Bernard Lord coming in 99, and Lord won, I think, 42 seats. So I think that was 13 then for the Liberals. I don't think Hampton had won more than 13 seats, so I'm going to say that it was Thériault. But then, again, I'm not as familiar with the Nova Scotia elections as I should be. 2006 would have been a minority government. The NDP was doing okay. I'm going to say it was Thériault and the New Brunswick Liberals.
Camille Thériault, punch that in. Okay, round number 6. Andrew Weaver's BC's Green in 2017.
Okay.
Brian Mason's Alberta NDP in 2012. An election that I think you know well, Alberta 2012. Or John Gerard's Manitoba Liberals in 99. So the theme here is not too many seats.
No. Okay, so I know that Andrew Weaver and the Greens won 3 seats in 2017. Gerard wouldn't have won 3, so it would have been 1 or 2. But then how many did Mason win? I think they might have won 4 in that election. Because that was the one where both the Liberals and the NDP dropped to like 10% of the vote. But the NDP still had like some support in Edmonton. Rachel Notley and Mason would have been elected. And so I'm going to say it was Brian Mason and the Alberta NDP.
Okay, punch that in. All right, last round, round 7. And this one has a theme for listeners. I had a drink or many drinks with Eric last weekend, and he told me how much he loved the between war elections. So this is the theme. You ready?
Yes.
William Lyon Mackenzie King's Liberals in 1921.
Okay.
Archer Mahan's Conservatives. Mahan? All right.
Mahan.
Archer Mahan's Conservatives in 1925. Or R.B. Bennett's Conservatives in 1930. Who won the most seats?
Okay. Well,
And this is your choice. This is your pick of periods, so you should.
So 1925 was a minority. So I don't think it would be that. Liberals were able to continue governing with the support of the Progressives. King in 21 also won, I think it was a minority, but it lasted for the full 4 years. I think it was like a almost minority. Bennett won a big win in 1930. He won a majority government there. That was during the Depression. So I think it'll be R.B. Bennett in 1930 who won the most seats.
So, all right, punch that in. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Your score is 5 out of 7. And so that means we're going to overtime.
Oh, no. I think last time I made myself worse. I feel like I should take the tie.
You take the tie?
Rather than try to win.
Is there one that you remember that you'd like to revisit? I could rename the parties if you want. So round 1 was the PQ. You chose René Lévesque. You picked that?
Yeah.
Round 2 was Bob Ray, Ed Stelmach, and Jean Charest. And you chose Ed Stelmach. Do you want to keep that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Round 3 were the 3 Gary Dewars victories. 99, 03, and 07. You chose 07.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with that too, yeah.
Okay. Round 4 was Jacques Parizeau's PQ in 89, Lynn McLeod's Ontario Liberals in 95, or Linda Haverstock Saskatchewan Liberals in 95, and you chose Jacques Parizeau. You want to keep that?
I'll go to McLeod. I'll go to McLeod.
Hesitation. You
Ontario.
go to McLeod? Okay.
Yeah.
Round 5 was Howard Hampton's Ontario NDP, Camille Thériault's New Brunswick Liberals, or Francis Mackenzie Liberals in Nova Scotia in 06. You chose Camille Thériault. Do you want to keep that?
I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. I'm going to switch to the Liberals because it was like a 3-way race and there was a minority. So I'm going to say that maybe they got more than 13 seats.
You mean in Nova Scotia? Yeah?
Yeah.
So Francis Mackenzie. Okay. Round 6 was the theme was not too many seats. It was Andrew Weaver's BC Greens in 17, Brian Mason's Alberta NDP in 12, or John Gerard's Manitoba Liberals in 99. And you chose Brian Mason. You want to keep?
I feel good about that one. I feel good about that one.
And the last one was your theme. You chose R.B. Bennett in 1930. You want to keep that?
Yeah, I think so. I think they did pretty well in that election.
Okay, so here's the final tally, my friend. Your score is 5 out of 7.
Oh, okay.
You are correct that Lynn McLeod's Ontario won 30 seats to Jacques Parizeau's 29 seats, so you changed it correctly. But Camille Thériault Camille
no way?
Thériault won 10 seats, and Francis McKenzie won 9 seats. And,
Oh, he
and
only
the-
won 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the other one you got wrong, my friend. You underestimated Jean Charest in 03. He won 76 seats. Ed Stelmach won 72. So it's a tie, but you know what? It's still pretty good because this is a tough quiz. So
Well, I did better than
good
last
for-
time.
Good
I did
for
better
you, my
than
friend.
last time. Was I correct that Brian Mason won 4 seats?
Andrew Weaver 3, Brian Mason 4, and
Okay.
Jean Gerard's Manitoba Liberals 1. So you nailed that perfectly.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
René
Bonus points for me.
Lévesque won 80 seats, Jacques Parizeau 77, and Lucien Bouchard 76. So, Oh, and Gary Dewar, he went from 32 to 35 to 36. So you
Okay,
were
yeah.
right,
See,
he
I
increased
remembered
his
that they
set, yeah.
kept on going up because then I think even in 2011, Selinger won 37. I think they
Which
kept
is
on going up.
impressive, right? Impressive.
Yeah.
Go against the grain of time, huh?
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
congrats, Eric. You did very well.
All right, I'll take a tie.
Yeah.
After last week's or 2 weeks ago debacle, I will take a tie. All right, number of the week. What do you got?
16% for the Justin Trudeau Liberals among young voters in the last Léger poll. Poiliev is at 37%, 33% for the NDP, and only 16% for the Liberals. This, I mean, we have to be careful with cause and effect here, but cost of living, the cost of housing has to weigh down far more on the young generation than on older voters, and I think this is what's causing it. Justin Trudeau they have 2 years to fix that. It's hard to fix that in a short time, but if Justin Trudeau is at 16% with young voters, it's going to be hard to repeat a fourth time.
What are the kids like these days? What could they do? You
TikTok or
you
something?
teach
Yeah.
teach kids. What are they like?
I have no idea. They're always on their phones, and I sound like a grandpa saying this. I love the kids that I teach to, so I know that the cost of living is really hard on them. So I know, again, it's not entirely the Liberals' fault. Let's be realistic. But if the Conservatives were in power, the NDP and Liberals would be all over the Conservatives because of cost of living. So it's fair game.
Of course.
It's fair game.
Mine is the number I mentioned earlier, and it's 44. Over the last 25 years, parties who have a one-member, one-vote kind of system where it's not delegated, 44% on the first ballot. If you get at least that, you end up winning. So I think for Bonnie Crombie, if she gets at least 44%, then she's as good as having won. And I'm not sure if I'm 100% correct on this, but I do think they are counting individually between rounds somehow or something like that. So it's not. I'm not sure if they're going to come out with results like 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes on each subsequent round. So if there is some time in between, and you're wondering whether Bonnie Crombie is going to win or not, if she got over 44% on the first one, I think she's going to win.
Very interesting.
Yes. All right. Well, that'll be it for this week's episode of The Numbers. We're going to get tired of each other. We're doing a live stream tonight. We met up on the weekend. We had an extra
it's so
episode of They
good.
Shift.
You're good
Yeah.
company, man. You're good company.
Good to hear it. All right. If you don't want to miss next week's episode of The Numbers, we'll talk about the Ontario Liberal results, the by-election, all sorts of stuff. Who knows what else comes out. You can join our Patreon page at thenumberspod.ca. And if you become a member, you get early access to the episodes on Thursdays. And you can take part in the Discord and the Patreon where we have very nice discussions. It's my favorite social media now.
Oh, yeah.
If I have anything interesting to say, I usually go there now. I'm not going to the other places. And if you're already part of our little community, we thank you so much for your support, and we hope that community is going to grow. So, Philippe, have a good week, and I'll see you in a couple hours, and then we'll chat again next week.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric, and thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your support.